With imagination, anything is possible and can even become reality. This is common knowledge. I'm not really telling you anything new. But what I'm really here to tell you is that imagination actually does have its limits. Allow me to explain my line of reasoning. Some people might say that must not have much of an imagination if I think that it has limitations. After all, many of us have been told all of our lives that imagination is as boundless as the universe itself. But I'm not talking about boundaries, I'm talking about limitations. Imagination has infinite potential, and therefore you can't put a box around it to limit it. We even have a popular phrase for imagining new things, thinking outside the box. Now, I just said that you can't put outer limits on imagination. So, what are these limits that I'm talking about? If I were to tell someone that nobody has ever had a thought that sprung from nowhere, they might be suspicious or even completely dismiss me. But the truth is that any new thought is built upon some kind of foundation. This foundation could be almost anything we know of or have thought of previously. Think about color, for example. Can you imagine a color you haven't seen? Of course, we do know that other colors exist outside of our visible spectrum. But that discovery came from the knowledge of the colors we do see. Someone somewhere asked themselves, what if there's more? The great limitation of imagination is the need of that foundation. If one were to imagine a new creature, it would share something in common with a creature we're already familiar with. One cannot imagine something that falls completely out of our current knowledge and understanding. Of course, we know that things we can't imagine can still exist, but that is a foundation for new ideas in and of itself. After all, unless something happens to reveal itself, the only way to discover it is to know where to start looking. So, in that way, imagination is the mother of discovery, like necessity is the mother of invention. Imagination and invention have been very influential in the development of the human race. We have infinite potential just like and thanks to our imaginations. However, just like imagination needs a foundational idea to create new ones, human beings need a foundational idea to create new things. The imagination is a product of human evolution, and I think there's a specific reason the imagination developed this way. Consider some earlier ancestors of mankind, back when they were creating tools for survival. What good would the idea for a new tool be if there was no purpose for it, or if there were no way to make it? It wouldn't aid survival, so imagination didn't really develop to allow for those ideas. Well, that's a convincing argument that the practical side of imagination has its limits, and an interesting idea about why that might be. But some would likely still argue that the creative imagination doesn't have the need for these foundational ideas. After all, abstract art is a thing that exists. And that is certainly true. But I ask myself what the purpose of art is. Some might say it serves no purpose, but that's the beauty of it. Others might say that it's what makes us human. But I say a picture speaks 1,000 words. I say art is for communication, and that in itself is a survival skill. Oftentimes, an artist has a message to convey when they decide to create a piece. Even a portrait or a painting of a landscape makes a statement about its subject, even if it's only to convey appearances. Art is most impactful, however, when it can be used to say something when words simply fail. For example, an artist's depiction of mental illness or such can create more empathy in its audience than they would feel when reading about it. And I'm certain that many of us have a collection of songs we listen to that make us feel understood by somebody. I often hear people describe a song as an anthem for a tough period in their life. So it can be said that when art is created with a specific purpose, it's subject to that same limitation of imagination, the foundational idea. But sometimes people can just scribble on the page and they end up transforming that into an awesome and unique piece of art. How could that possibly be subject to limits? Well, people are pattern seeking, and we're constantly trying to make sense out of everything. When the artist sees potential in their scribbles, it's gonna link back to something. They might make a face out of it, or it might evoke an emotional response. But people are familiar with both, and that's what makes it a foundational idea. The ability to imagine and communicate our imaginations is what brought us so far, and it's the reason we continue to rise. New technologies, new ways of thinking, and even the language I'm speaking right now are all owed to imagination, the ability to make something from what we have. Some might be disheartened or even disturbed to think about imagination as being limited. But remember that it's boundless as well. We can't reach far beyond what we know, but we will create and learn more. And the more we learn, the more ideas we have to build from in order to continue. I often talk to some of the creative people in my life, and I always run into that same nervous fear. What if they're not original enough? They don't want their work to be described as like that, but with this. People will be able to draw those comparisons no matter what they do, though. It's who we are. If all of humanity was too worried about borrowing too heavily from others, humanity would likely still be in the Stone Age. Life is simply too short for everyone to do their own R&D, so to speak. As Sir Isaac Newton once said, "If I have seen further than others, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants."